When I married Olivia 8 years ago, I thought I'd hit the jackpot. She was everything I'd ever wanted, smart, beautiful, and endlessly supportive. We were the kind of couple people looked up to, the ones friends referred to as relationship goals. Life wasn't perfect, whose is, but we had a good rhythm going. I worked long hours as a software engineer to provide for our family, and Olivia, after leaving her career in marketing, focused on raising our 2 kids, Ella, 7, and Max, 4. It was a partnership, a well-oiled machine. At least, that's what I thought. The cracks started forming about 6 months ago, subtle at first, so subtle I didn't even notice. Olivia had always been more laid back than me. She didn't fuss over her appearance too much, jeans and a ponytail were her go-to, and her idea of exercise was walking the kids to the park. But one day, seemingly out of nowhere, she decided to join a gym. "It's time for me to focus on myself," she'd said over breakfast one morning. She looked genuinely excited, so I encouraged her. "It's great you're making time for yourself," I replied, feeling a twinge of guilt for how often work pulled me away from the family. If this was her way of finding balance, who was I to argue? At first, the change seemed harmless. She'd head to the gym a few mornings a week while I was at work and the kids were at school. Then mornings turned into afternoons, and 2 or 3 times a week became almost every day. I started joking that the gym was her second home. She laughed it off but didn't deny it. The real turning point came when she started talking about Jake. Jake this. Jake that. Jake, the fitness instructor, who had apparently revolutionized her life. He'd shown her how to deadlift properly, helped her perfect her squat form, and, as Olivia put it, really understood how to motivate people. "Jake says I'm a natural athlete," she told me one evening as we sat on the couch. She was scrolling through her phone, a distracted smile on her face. "He even thinks I could compete in one of those amateur fitness competitions if I wanted to." "That's great, Liv," I replied, forcing a smile. But in truth, I was starting to feel uneasy. I couldn't put my finger on why. Maybe it was the way she lit up when she talked about him, or maybe it was the fact that Jake's name was coming up more often than anything related to our family. It was like she was sharing a part of her life that I wasn't invited to. Still, I pushed the doubts aside. Olivia was happier than I'd seen her in years, and I didn't want to be the overbearing husband who turned that into a problem. I told myself that this was just a phase, that it didn't mean anything. But the changes didn't stop at her gym routine. She started dressing differently, leggings that looked painted on, tank tops that left little to the imagination. She replaced her old sneakers with high-end trainers and talked about macros and meal prepping like she'd been doing it for years. She even started posting gym selfies on Instagram, something she'd never done before. "You look great," I told her one evening as she modeled a new workout outfit. And she did. Her body had transformed, leaner, more toned, but there was something else, too. A confidence that bordered on cockiness, a glimmer in her eye that hadn't been there before. "Thanks," she said, smiling. "Jake's been pushing me really hard, but it's paying off." There it was again. Jake. My unease grew stronger, but I kept brushing it off. I wanted to believe that I was imagining things, that my jealousy was unfounded. After all, Olivia was my wife, and I trusted her. We had built a life together, a life that didn't leave room for secrets or lies. Or so I thought. Then there was the night she came home late from the gym. It was almost 9 p.m., and I just finished putting the kids to bed. She walked through the door with a flush on her cheeks, her hair damp with sweat, and a smile that looked a little too wide. "Sorry I'm late," she said, dropping her gym bag by the door. "Jake stayed after to give me some extra pointers. He's really dedicated to helping his clients succeed." I nodded, my throat tightening. "That's nice of him." "Yeah," she said, heading to the kitchen to grab a water bottle. "You should meet him sometime. You'd really like him." I wasn't so sure about that. The final straw came when she started canceling plans with me to spend more time at the gym. I'd planned a rare date night for us, dinner and a movie, but Olivia had backed out at the last minute. Jake invited me to a group training session tonight, she explained, her tone light and breezy as if that made it okay. It's a special session for his top clients. I can't miss it. I didn't argue. What was the point? But as I watched her leave, something in my chest twisted painfully. She was pulling away, little by little, and I didn't know how to stop it. Still, I told myself it wasn't a big deal. I was overthinking things. Olivia had always been loyal to a fault, and she loved our family. Maybe she was just going through something, a midlife crisis or a need to reclaim her identity. She'd find her way back to us eventually. But deep down, a quiet voice whispered that something wasn't right. And that voice was growing louder by the day. It had been a chaotic day at work, the kind where back-to-back meetings left my brain fried and my to-do list longer than it had been in the morning. I was exhausted and relieved when my final meeting of the day got cancelled. For once, I could leave the office early, get home before dinner, and spend some quality time with the kids. Maybe I'd even surprise Olivia, who was likely at the gym. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the late afternoon sun cast a warm glow over the house. Everything seemed peaceful. Ella's bike leaned against the porch railing, and Max's soccer ball rested on the lawn. I stepped out of the car, taking a moment to appreciate the stillness. The thought of seeing Olivia filled me with anticipation. Maybe we could enjoy a quiet evening after the kids went to bed, reconnect, like we used to. But as I approached the front door, I noticed something strange. Her car was in the driveway. Olivia wasn't supposed to be home. Curious, I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The house was eerily quiet, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. Usually, Ella and Max would be playing or watching TV, but they weren't here. A quick glance around the living room confirmed it, they were at my mom's house. Olivia? I called out, my voice echoing through the empty space. No response. I headed toward the kitchen, figuring she might be preparing dinner, but the room was empty. Her gym bag sat on the counter, a towel draped over it, and a water bottle half full. That's when I heard it, soft, muffled sounds coming from upstairs. I froze, my pulse quickening. It wasn't the kind of noise you'd hear from a TV show or a phone call. It was different. My gut clenched as I stood there, straining to listen. A quiet laugh drifted down the stairs, followed by a low voice I didn't recognize. Male. My heart thudded painfully in my chest. Slowly, I crept toward the staircase, careful to avoid the creaky step near the middle. The sounds grew louder with each step. A playful giggle. A hushed murmur. My stomach churned as realization dawned, cold and bitter. I reached the top of the stairs, the noises now unmistakable. Olivia's laugh. A man's deep, encouraging tone. And then the unmistakable rhythm of a bed frame softly creaking. My legs moved on autopilot, carrying me toward the door of our bedroom. The door was slightly ajar, just enough for a sliver of light to spill into the hallway. I stopped a foot away, every muscle in my body taut. I didn't want to look. I didn't want to know. But I had to. With a trembling hand, I pushed the door open a fraction more and peeked inside. There they were. Olivia and Jake, tangled in each other, oblivious to the world around them. Jake's shirt was off, his toned body glistening with sweat. Olivia's hair was tousled, her face flushed, her body arching toward him in a way that made my chest ache. I couldn't breathe. They laughed softly, completely at ease, like they were in some kind of bubble where the outside world didn't exist. My world, the one I thought we'd built together, shattered in an instant. I should have stormed in, demanded an explanation, thrown him out of my house. But I didn't. Instead, I pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it, but I managed to steady myself. I hit record, capturing the scene playing out before me. Jake leaned down, murmuring something into Olivia's ear that made her laugh again, soft and breathy. She ran her fingers through his hair, her wedding ring glinting in the light. My wedding ring. I felt like I was watching someone else's life, like this couldn't possibly be happening to me. But the cold reality of my phone in my hand reminded me that it was. They moved closer, their intimacy deepening, and I couldn't take it anymore. My chest felt like it was about to explode. I backed away slowly, making sure my footsteps were silent, and slipped out of the room. Downstairs, I leaned against the wall, my breath coming in shallow gasps. My mind raced, 1,000 thoughts competing for attention. How long had this been going on? How could she do this to me, to our family? And what was I supposed to do now? I glanced at my phone, the video still playing on the screen. I stopped the recording and stared at the frozen image of Olivia's face, her expression one of joy and abandon. A face she hadn't shown me in months. The sound of laughter floated down from upstairs, stabbing me like a knife. I wanted to yell, to scream, to confront her right then and there. But something held me back. Instead, I slipped out the front door, letting it close softly behind me. Sitting in my car, I stared at the steering wheel, my grip so tight my knuckles turned white. I could still hear their voices in my head, their laughter, their casual intimacy. My stomach twisted painfully, and for a moment, I thought I might be sick. I replayed the video, each second cementing the betrayal. I couldn't unsee it, couldn't unhear it. But I knew one thing for sure, I wasn't going to act impulsively. Not yet. Whatever I did next had to be careful. Calculated. Because this wasn't just about me and Olivia anymore. This was about protecting my kids, my future, and my dignity. But first, I needed to process what had just happened. And I needed to figure out how to confront Olivia without letting my emotions spiral out of control. As I sat there in the fading light, one thought repeated in my mind, over and over again. The life I thought I had was gone. And Olivia had no idea what was coming. The next morning, I woke up on the couch, though I don't remember falling asleep. My mind had been a relentless storm of anger, sadness, and disbelief. I replayed the events from the previous night over and over until the emotions numbed into a single, focused purpose: I had to confront her. Olivia's usual morning routine was underway. I could hear the clatter of dishes in the kitchen and the faint hum of her favorite podcast. For a moment, the normalcy felt surreal, like the calm before a hurricane. I walked into the kitchen, my phone in my pocket, the video weighing on me like a grenade waiting to be detonated. Olivia stood at the counter, pouring coffee, humming softly. She looked up and smiled when she saw me. "Morning," she said, sliding a mug toward me. "You're up early. Want some eggs?" I didn't respond, didn't even look at the coffee. Instead, I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "Where were you yesterday?" She blinked, clearly caught off guard. "What do you mean?" "I was home." "No, you weren't." My voice was calm, but the steel behind it made her falter. "Try again." Her eyes narrowed, confusion giving way to mild annoyance. "Mark, what's going on?" "I was here. The kids were at your mom's, and I had some time to myself." "Time to yourself," I echoed, letting the words hang in the air. "Is that what you call it?" Her face stiffened, her hands clutching the edge of the counter. "What are you accusing me of?" I pulled my phone from my pocket and unlocked it. Her eyes flicked to the screen as I tapped the video and turned it toward her. The color drained from her face. In an instant, her confident posture collapsed, replaced by wide eyes and trembling lips. What is this?" she stammered. "You tell me," I said coldly. She didn't answer, her gaze glued to the screen as the damning footage played out. Her breathing quickened, and she reached for the phone, but I pulled it back. "Stop," she whispered, her voice cracking. Turn it off. Why? It's just a little time to yourself, right? My voice was razor sharp, each word cutting deeper. How long has this been going on, Olivia? She shook her head, tears pooling in her eyes. It's not what it looks like. Don't, I interrupted. Don't insult me by lying. I saw everything. You think I misunderstood that? I don't know what to say, she murmured, her shoulders slumping. Her voice was soft, fragile, as if she were the victim. Try the truth, I said, stepping closer. That would be a good place to start. She wiped her eyes and took a shaky breath. It just happened, Mark. I didn't plan for this. I never meant to hurt you. Oh, that's comforting, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. So you didn't mean to hurt me while sneaking around with him in our bed? Her eyes widened. I was lonely, she blurted, her tone shifting from guilt to anger. You're always at work, Mark. I'm here alone, day after day, feeling invisible. When was the last time you even looked at me the way he does? So this is my fault now? I said, my voice rising. I work long hours to give you and the kids a good life, and this is how you repay me? With excuses. It's not an excuse, she shouted. It's the truth. I needed something, someone, and you weren't there. I stared at her, stunned by her audacity. You needed attention. So instead of talking to me, you decided to destroy our family for what? Validation from a gym rat? Her face twisted with anger. Jake understands me. He listens to me. You're so wrapped up in work you barely notice me anymore. Don't you dare, I said, pointing a finger at her. Don't you dare try to justify this as my failing. I've done nothing but support you, Olivia. I've been here every step of the way, and you threw it all away for what? A fling? A thrill? She started crying again, her anger melting into despair. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she sobbed. I swear. It was just supposed to be, harmless. Harmless? I laughed bitterly. You call this harmless? Before she could answer, the doorbell rang. We both froze. I knew exactly who it was. I had invited him. I guess Jake decided to join the conversation, I said coolly. Her eyes widened in panic. You didn't, Mark, no. But I was already walking toward the door. When I opened it, there he was, Jake, with his confident smirk and gym bag slung over his shoulder. The smirk faltered the moment he saw me. Oh, he said, his voice dropping. Mark, right? That's me, I said, stepping aside. Come on in. He hesitated but walked in, clearly sensing the tension in the air. Olivia stood frozen in the kitchen, her tear-streaked face a mix of shock and dread. What's going on? Jake asked, looking between us. You tell me, I said, closing the door. I think Olivia has some explaining to do. Jake's brows furrowed as he turned to Olivia. You didn't tell him? Tell me what? I asked, crossing my arms. That she's been cheating on me with her personal trainer? Or that she brought you into my house, into my bed? Because I already know. Jake's face paled. Whoa, hold on. This isn't what you think. Really? I said, pulling out my phone and showing him the video. Because it seems pretty clear to me. His mouth opened and closed, no words coming out. Finally, he said, Look, man, I didn't know she was still with you. She told me you were separated. Separated? I glanced at Olivia, who was now trembling. That's a new one. Care to comment? She looked at Jake, desperation in her eyes. I didn't mean, Jake, I was going to tell him. I just needed time. He stepped back, shaking his head. You said this was over. You told me he wasn't in the picture anymore. Well, surprise. I snapped. I'm very much in the picture. And now you're both going to explain yourselves. Jake raised his hands defensively. Look, I didn't mean to get involved in this. If I'd known. Save it, I cut him off. You both knew exactly what you were doing. Olivia broke down completely, sinking into a chair. Mark, please, she sobbed. I made a mistake. I know I messed up, but can we just talk about this? Just us. I stared at her, the woman I'd loved and trusted, now a stranger sitting in front of me. Talk. Now you want to talk. After everything you've done. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I'll do anything to fix this, Mark. Please. I looked at her, then at Jake, who looked like he wanted to disappear. Finally, I said, there's nothing to fix, Olivia. You broke this. Both of you. With that, I turned and walked out the door, leaving them behind. My mind was racing, but one thing was clear, I wasn't going to let them drag me down with their lies and deceit. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. I sat alone in my car, parked at the edge of a quiet lot overlooking the lake, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions, each one more crushing than the last: anger, betrayal, disbelief, sadness. But above all, there was this hollow, aching sense of loss. Olivia. My Olivia. The woman I'd trusted with every vulnerable part of me, the mother of my children, the person I thought I'd grow old with. She had destroyed it all, torn our life apart for a man she barely knew. I replayed the confrontation in my mind, her tear-streaked face as she begged me to talk, the way Jake stumbled over his excuses like a guilty schoolboy caught red-handed. Their betrayal was clear, but what hit me hardest wasn't the infidelity itself, it was the cold realization that I hadn't seen it coming. I'd been blind, caught up in the rhythms of work and family life, trusting her to be the same woman I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. But she wasn't that woman anymore. And maybe I wasn't the same man. The thought brought a fresh wave of grief. Was this my fault? Had I been so consumed with providing for our family, with being the rock, that I'd overlooked her needs? But no, she could have talked to me. She could have told me she felt lonely, ignored, unfulfilled. Instead, she'd chosen to sneak around, to betray me in the cruelest way possible. I thought about our kids, Ella and Max. My chest tightened painfully. They had no idea their world was about to change forever. How could I tell them? How could I explain that their mom and dad wouldn't be together anymore? Ella was old enough to understand, she'd noticed the tension, the absence of laughter between Olivia and me. But Max? He was too young to comprehend any of this. He adored his mom, worshipped the ground she walked on. The thought of shattering that innocent devotion felt unbearable. I had to protect them. No matter what I was feeling, no matter how much I wanted to scream, cry, or rage, I couldn't let my emotions take over. My kids needed stability, not chaos. But protecting them meant playing this smart. I couldn't let Olivia spin this into something it wasn't. If she decided to play the victim, to manipulate the situation in her favor, I needed to be ready. And if this went to court, divorce, custody battles, I needed to make sure I had the upper hand. The anger simmering beneath my sadness began to solidify into something colder, sharper: resolve. I pulled out my phone and stared at the video. It was the smoking gun, the undeniable proof of her betrayal. I hated that it existed, hated that I'd been forced to record it, but now it was my shield, my weapon. With a deep breath, I uploaded it to a secure cloud drive, ensuring it was backed up. I didn't trust anything to chance, not with so much at stake. My next call was to my attorney, Jeff. He was an old college friend, and I trusted him to guide me through what was bound to be a messy process. Mark, what's going on? Jeff asked, his voice laced with concern as I explained the situation. Jeff, I said, my voice tight, I need to make sure my kids come out of this okay. That's my only priority. But I also need to protect myself. Olivia isn't the person I thought she was, and I can't take any chances. Jeff was quiet for a moment before responding. I get it, Mark. First, take a deep breath. This isn't going to be easy, but you've got the evidence. That's a huge advantage. Don't do anything rash. Stay calm, stay focused, and let me handle the legal side of things. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Thanks, Jeff. I feel like I'm drowning here. You're not, he said firmly. You're doing the right thing by keeping your emotions in check. Focus on your kids. Focus on yourself. I'll take care of the rest. After hanging up, I leaned back in my seat, staring out at the water. The sun was setting, painting the lake in hues of orange and gold. It was beautiful, serene, the opposite of the chaos swirling inside me. I thought about Ella's school recital coming up next week, the way Max had been so excited to show me his latest Lego creation. These moments, these fleeting pieces of childhood, were what mattered most. I couldn't let Olivia's choices take those away from them. But how was I supposed to co-parent with her after this? How could I sit across from her at a parent-teacher conference or stand next to her at a soccer game, knowing what she'd done? The thought of seeing her with Jake, of her bringing him into our children's lives, made my blood boil. I gripped the steering wheel again, my jaw tightening. That wasn't going to happen. Not on my watch. I had to be strategic. Every move I made from this point on would determine the future for me and my kids. There was no room for mistakes, no room for impulsive decisions. I made a mental list of everything I needed to do. First, I'd secure the financials, freeze joint accounts, move my direct deposits into a separate account she couldn't touch. Next, I'd gather all the evidence I had of her infidelity, from the video to the messages I'd found on her phone. And then, I'd have to have the hardest conversation of all, telling the kids. My heart ached at the thought. Ella was perceptive, she'd probably already picked up on the tension between Olivia and me. But how could I look Max in the eye and explain that his mom and dad wouldn't live together anymore? That his world was about to change in ways he couldn't understand. I wiped my eyes, frustrated by the tears I couldn't hold back. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. I'd worked so hard to build a life for my family, to give my kids a stable home. And now it was all falling apart. But I couldn't afford to wallow in self-pity. My kids needed me to be strong, to be their anchor in the storm. I didn't have the luxury of falling apart. As the sky darkened, I started the car and drove home. The house felt different when I walked in, colder, emptier. Olivia was in the living room, her face pale and drawn. She looked up when I entered, but I didn't meet her gaze. "Mark," she said softly. "Can we talk?" "Not now," I replied, my voice flat. "I need some space." I headed upstairs, shutting the door to our bedroom, the bedroom we'd once shared. Now it felt like just another room, stripped of the warmth and intimacy it once held. Sitting on the edge of the bed, I stared at the framed photo on the nightstand. It was taken at Max's 3rd birthday party, all of us grinning at the camera, our arms wrapped around each other. I barely recognized the people in it. My family had been my everything. And now, I had to fight to protect what was left of it. I didn't know how I was going to get through this. But I knew one thing for sure, I wouldn't let Olivia's betrayal define me or destroy the life I'd built for my kids. This was just the beginning. The days that followed were a blur of planning and careful execution. I didn't lash out. I didn't scream. Instead, I channeled my emotions into action, ensuring that when the dust settled, I'd be the one left standing, not Olivia, not Jake. The first step was simple, securing my position. I met with Jeff, my attorney, 2 days after the confrontation. Sitting across from him in his small but tidy office, I laid everything out, the video, the financial situation, and my concerns about the kids. Jeff nodded as I spoke, his expression serious but encouraging. "You're in a strong position, Mark," he said, tapping a pen against his notepad. "Infidelity won't necessarily guarantee custody, but the evidence you have will help. Plus, your income stability works in your favor. What we need to do is make sure Olivia doesn't have a chance to blindside you." That's exactly what I wanted to hear. Under Jeff's guidance, I moved my direct deposits into a separate bank account Olivia couldn't access. I also locked down our shared credit cards, leaving only the essentials active. I didn't want her draining our accounts once she realized what was happening. The next step was gathering evidence. Beyond the video, I collected every bit of information I could find, text messages, timestamps from the gym, and even notes about her frequent, late-night sessions. Jeff assured me that these would help us argue for a more favorable custody arrangement. With the legal side in motion, it was time for the public reckoning. A week later, I found out that Jake was hosting a fitness seminar at Olivia's gym. It was all over her social media, a series of posts hyping him up, complete with photos of her beaming beside him, oblivious to what was coming. The event was free, open to the public, and packed with people eager to see Jake in action. Perfect. I arrived just as the seminar was starting, slipping into the back unnoticed. The room buzzed with energy as Jake strode across the stage, microphone in hand, flashing his trademark smile. Olivia was there, of course, standing near the front with a group of other gym regulars. She looked radiant, as if the betrayal had never happened. I stood quietly, waiting for the right moment. About halfway through Jake's demonstration, I approached the AV booth, where the projector was running. The operator, a young guy who looked barely out of college, glanced at me curiously. "Hey," I said, flashing a disarming smile. "I'm with Jake. He wanted me to queue up a special video for the Q&A session." The kid hesitated, but I handed him a flash drive and said, "Trust me. He's going to love this." The moment Jake handed the microphone to the audience for questions, I signaled the AV operator. The lights dimmed, and the screen behind Jake came to life. At first, the room was quiet, unsure of what was happening. Then, the video began to play, Olivia and Jake, tangled in each other on my bed, laughing and whispering sweet nothings. Gasps erupted from the crowd. People turned to each other, whispering in shock. Olivia froze, her face draining of color as she realized what was playing. Jake, oblivious at first, turned to look at the screen. His confident grin evaporated. "What the?" Jake started, but I cut him off. "Keep watching, Jake," I called out, stepping forward. "This is the best part." Olivia's eyes found mine, wide with horror. "Mark," she hissed, her voice trembling. I ignored her. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, addressing the crowd, "this is your fitness guru and his dedicated client. Looks like they've been getting more of a workout than the rest of you." The room erupted into chaos, people shouting, Olivia pleading for someone to shut off the video, Jake trying to explain himself. I turned to the AV operator and gave him a nod. He stopped the video, but the damage was done. "Enjoy your seminar," I said with a cold smile, turning on my heel and walking out. Behind me, I heard Olivia calling my name, but I didn't stop. The final step was delivering the knockout punch. The following morning, Olivia was served with divorce papers. The terms were clear and unyielding, would retain primary custody of Ella and Max, and she would have no claim to the marital home. The evidence of her infidelity ensured that any fight she might put up would be an uphill battle. I expected a confrontation when she came to the house later that day, but to my surprise, she was quiet. She sat across from me at the dining table, clutching the papers, her hands trembling. "Mark," she said softly, "do we really have to do this?" I stared at her, the woman I once loved, and felt nothing but exhaustion. "You made this choice, Olivia. I'm just making sure the kids and I aren't collateral damage. Her eyes filled with tears. I made a mistake. Can't we work through this? A mistake? I said, my voice rising. You don't destroy a marriage over a mistake, Olivia. You lied to me, to our kids. You brought him into our home. Our bed. That's not a mistake. That's a series of choices. She looked down, tears streaming down her face. But I couldn't bring myself to care. You can take the deal, Olivia, I said, my voice firm. Or you can fight me. But I promise you, the kids stay with me. And if you think Jake is going to stand by you after this, think again. His career is over. I saw the defeat in her eyes as she nodded, too broken to argue. The fallout was swift and brutal. Jake was fired from the gym within days. Apparently, the owner didn't take kindly to his employees tarnishing the brand's reputation. Olivia, once a social butterfly among the gym crowd, became a pariah. People whispered about her everywhere she went. As for me, I focused on rebuilding. I poured my energy into Ella and Max, making sure they felt safe and loved through the transition. I explained the divorce as gently as I could, assuring them that both their parents loved them, even if we couldn't live together anymore. It wasn't easy, but over time, we found our rhythm again. Looking back, I realize betrayal doesn't just destroy a relationship, it forces you to confront truths you'd rather ignore. Olivia's actions weren't a reflection of my shortcomings, they were a reflection of her choices, her lack of integrity. I've learned to trust my instincts and value my self-respect. If I could offer one piece of advice, it's this: don't ignore the signs. If something feels off, it probably is. And if someone betrays you, remember that their actions define them, not you. The pain of betrayal is sharp, but it doesn't have to define your story. It's just one chapter in a much bigger book. For me, the next chapter is about healing, rebuilding, and being the best dad I can be. And that's a story I'm proud to tell.